Chapter 6. They found Peter Hobbs under his car, an old green car. He got up slowly. He wore old blue trousers and a dirty orange shirt. "We want to talk about Mrs. Clarkson," Inspector Walsh said. "Oh, it's about her," Peter said. He looked at the inspector. "I know she's dead. Someone in the village told me." "Why did you go to the Clarksons' house last night?"
"Jackie wanted me to come and see her brother Roger. 'You're angry,' she said. 'Come and tell Roger.' I went to the house, but nobody opened the door. So I made a lot of noise, and then they opened the door. Old Mrs. Clarkson wasn't there, but I told Roger. I told them all."
Peter hit the car with his hand.
"I wanted to kill that woman. I lost my job, my first job, because of her. Last month, I was in trouble with the police, and that old woman wrote to my office, and she told them about the police. I wanted to kill her."
"Take it easy," Inspector Walsh said. "What happened next?"
"Jackie gave me some coffee, but her brother didn't listen to me," Peter said angrily. "Then Tom Briggs came in. He wanted to talk to Roger too, but Roger didn't listen to him. Jackie was very unhappy. She nearly cried. Then I went home. That's all."
"I see. Now tell me about the tablets. You went to the village on Thursday?"
"Tablets? Oh, yes, I remember. Jackie wanted me to get her mother's tablets from the village. I go to the village on my bicycle. This car doesn't work."
"Thank you, Peter. That's all."
"That's all?"
Peter laughed angrily.
"Ha! You're going to come back. I know that. I know the police."
Tom Briggs' farm was about half a mile away, near the river. It was not a big farm, and the house was old and dirty. "Not much money here," Inspector Walsh said. Tom Briggs was a young man, about 30 years old, with dirty hands and bad teeth. "What's wrong?" "Excuse me, I'm eating my dinner," he said. "We can wait. Finish your dinner," Inspector Walsh said. "We want to ask 1 or 2 questions about last night." "Come and wait in the front room," Tom said, and opened the door. Inspector Walsh looked at the things in the front room. There was an old black and white television, and some books on the table. There was a picture of a happy young girl with long brown hair on the table too. Inspector Walsh looked at the picture for a long time. Who was the girl? Tom Briggs came back into the front room.
"Finished?"
Inspector Walsh asked.
"You know Mrs. Clarkson is dead?"
Tom Briggs sat down suddenly on the nearest chair.
"What? How did she die? When did it happen? I was there last night."
"She died last night or early this morning?"
"What did you do last night?" "Me? Why are you asking me?" "I went there to meet Mr. Clarkson, Roger. I'm losing money on this farm, and I need more land. I want half Mrs. Clarkson's garden." "You went into the kitchen. What did you do next? Can you remember?" Tom Briggs looked at Sergeant Foster, and then back at Inspector Walsh. "I remember it very well. All the family were in the kitchen. Peter Hobbs was there too. I talked to Roger. He wants his mother to sell the house, but he wants the land. He doesn't want me to have it. But now Mrs. Clarkson is dead. What's going to happen now?"
Inspector Walsh got up and took the picture of the girl from the table.
"Who's this?"
Tom's face went red.
"Who? Oh, that's a friend. It's not. It was a long time ago."
The two detectives walked back to the Clarksons' house through the garden. It was beautiful, green and quiet. Inspector Walsh felt tired and hungry. Who killed Molly? He knew the answer now, but he needed to ask one or two more questions.
"Let's go, Sergeant," he said, and put on his hat again. "Tomorrow is a new day."
Chapter 7. On Monday morning, Sergeant Foster went to Roger's office and asked some questions. And then he went to Albert's house and asked some more questions. Inspector Walsh sat in his office and telephoned. He made phone calls about Peter Hobbs, and he made phone calls about Tom Briggs. And then he had some coffee and sandwiches. At 3 o'clock, the two detectives drove to the Clarksons' house.
"I would like to see everyone," he told Roger.
Everyone came into the sitting room and sat down. Inspector Walsh stood in front of the windows and looked at them, one by one.
"I want to talk to you. Someone killed Molly Clarkson. Someone put sleeping tablets in her hot milk and killed her. Nobody wanted to tell me the true story. But now I know the true story, and I'm going to tell you."
The two dogs came slowly into the room and sat down at Diane's feet. It was very quiet in the room. The inspector looked at Albert.
"Mr. King, your wife is very ill.
and needs a nurse. You told me this. You didn't tell me about your house. You're selling your house next month because you need the money. Albert was angry. Last year, I asked Molly's husband for some money, and he said yes. But then he died in an accident.
Accident? Diane cried. That was no accident. Mother killed Daddy because she wanted his money.
Let's talk about you now, Diane, said Inspector Walsh. You visited your mother every month, and you took money from her. Last month, she gave you money for your television. This month, she gave you money for your telephone. Every month, you told your mother, it was no accident. You killed Daddy. I'm going to tell the police. Your mother was afraid of the police, and so she gave you the money. But in the end, she wanted to stop you. She told Dr. Pratt. No more money, she told Dr. Pratt on Thursday, and on Saturday she died. You took the hot milk to your mother. What did she tell you? Diane began to cry.
I loved Daddy. He always gave money to me. He loved me. It was Mother. She didn't love Daddy, and she didn't love me.
Diane stopped. The dogs got up and went to the door.
It's true. I took a lot of money from Mother. On Saturday she told me, no more money. I wanted to kill her, but I didn't.
The dogs came back and sat down again at Diane's feet. Inspector Walsh looked at Roger. Mr. Clarkson also needed money. Roger's face went red. Don't tell them, please. Mr. Clarkson lost his job last month. He has no money, but he has an expensive house and an expensive car. He likes expensive things. His sisters looked at him, but Roger put his hand over his eyes. Don't talk to me.
It doesn't matter now,
Diane said.
Mother is dead, and we have a lot of money. You don't need a job.
Roger's face went red again. Be quiet, Diane. Now, Inspector Walsh began again. Peter Hobbs is a very angry young man. Mrs. Clarkson was not very nice to him. He got the sleeping tablets from the shop. But did he put the tablets in the hot milk? I think not. Tom Briggs wanted half the garden for his farm. He was in the kitchen that night. Did he put sleeping tablets in the hot milk? I think not. Suddenly it began to rain. For a minute, everyone watched it through the window. Jackie took a cigarette from her bag and began to smoke. But someone wanted Peter Hobbs to come into the kitchen that night. She wanted everyone to see him and listen to him, Inspector Walsh said. She? I don't understand, Roger began, and stopped. Inspector Walsh moved away from the window and sat down. I'm going to tell you the true story now. Miss Clarkson, you wanted Peter Hobbs to come to the house that night. He was very angry with your mother because of that letter. He said, I want to kill her. And you wanted everyone to hear that. Why? Jackie's face went white. It's not true. What about Diane? You found the empty bottle in her bag. Diane stood up. In my bag? Jackie, what are you talking about? Be quiet, please, and sit down, Inspector Walsh said. He looked at Jackie. It's true. We found the bottle in Diane's bag. But how do you know that? We didn't tell you. You did? Before? You told me before. No. We found the empty bottle in Diane's room. We told you that. You talked about Diane's bag. We didn't tell you. Sergeant Foster wrote it all down. Inspector Walsh looked carefully at Jackie. A long time ago, you knew Tom Briggs. He was the gardener here, and you loved him. But your mother didn't like him. Jackie put her hands to her head. No! No! We found your picture, an old one, in Mr. Briggs' house. You were younger then, and your hair was long. Last year, Tom Briggs came back, and you wanted him. He loved you too, but he had no money. He wanted the garden for his farm. He wanted money. He wanted you. But your mother said no. In the end, you wanted to kill your mother. And you did kill her. Your mother went downstairs to see the dogs. And you put the sleeping tablets in her hot milk. Later, you put the empty bottle in Diane's bag. Jackie stood up. Her eyes were dark and afraid.
"You don't understand,"
she cried.
"Mother gave me nothing. All those years. I wanted to be happy. To be with Tom. That's all. I love Tom. And he loves me. But Mother said no. Always no."
Then she began to cry. Nobody looked at her. Jackie left the house in a police car. Inspector Walsh watched, and then walked slowly to his car. He felt tired and hungry. He stopped and looked back at the house. "Well," he said to Sergeant Foster, "in the end, they got the money. Albert, Roger, Diane. They're all rich now. But are they going to be happy?" He got into the car. "Let's go," he said. "I'm hungry. I need a sandwich."
Everybody knew about the comet. It was in all the newspapers. When it finally passed close to the Earth, it lit up the sky for 3 nights. It was beautiful. People who were not usually interested in looking beyond their television screens took at least one look outside. Even people like Darren. Darren was looking in the bathroom mirror at the spots on his face. They were near his nose. His mum always said he got spots because he ate too many sweets. But he hated sweets and he never ate chocolate. His mum loved chocolate and she never got spots. It wasn't fair. Darren was just going to examine his biggest spot when his mum called out, "Darren! Darren! Look at this!" "Oh, Mum, I'm busy." But Darren's mum refused to take no for an answer. She knew her 13-year-old son liked science fiction. A bit of science fact would do him no harm. This sort of thing didn't happen every day after all. They said that this comet was only going to pass the Earth once. She didn't want Darren to miss it. "Darren Miller, come down right now!" When Darren got downstairs, the door to the garden was open. He could see both his parents outside. They were looking up, their faces lit by a gentle light. He went out and stood next to them. Then he too looked up. It was indeed a lovely thing to see. Darren was pleased his mum had called him. The sky was full of beautiful coloured light. It made Darren think of Christmas lights and all the bright colours he loved when he was younger. It was so beautiful that he almost forgot about his spots. The next day, all of the newspapers were full of pictures and stories about the comet. Some of the newspapers were quite excited about it, because the comet had passed very close to the Earth. "Comet nearly hits Earth," said one headline in a newspaper. "Earth escapes comet," said another. Most of the newspaper reports also mentioned the beauty of the comet. They all said how lucky we were to see such a wonderful thing. Of course, there were the usual pessimists who said that the comet would put something nasty into the air we breathe. Others said the comet was a sign that the end of the Earth was coming. However, most people took no notice of these warnings. Life went on as usual. Life for Darren meant getting ready for school again after the holidays. Comets were nice, but now he had more important things to think about. He had to make himself look good for the beautiful Vanessa. Darren's school was just an ordinary school in the city of Sheffield in England. It was no better than any other school in Sheffield, but it did have Vanessa. Vanessa was a brown-haired, brown-eyed girl in the same year as Darren. She had smiled at Darren once. He remembered it well. It had happened in the last week before the holidays. He had let her go in front of him in the queue for lunch. She hadn't said thank you, but she had given him a little smile. It had showed her perfect white teeth. He had been too nervous to speak to her. He just couldn't do it. It would be easier, he felt, to grow wings and fly up to the ceiling. This time he would be ready. He would put on lots of deodorant to make himself smell nice. He wanted to have another look at his spots, and just maybe have a shave. The night before, he had felt something above his mouth that might be the first hairs of a moustache. He made sure he got to the bathroom before everyone else that morning. He wanted to have a close look at those spots. And his new moustache. "Darren, will you be in there for a long time?" It was Darren's mum. "Your father wants to use the bathroom." Darren knew his dad always spent ages in the bathroom. Well, his dad could wait today for a change. "I'll be out soon, Mum," said Darren. But he was lying. He wanted to look good and smell good. It could take a long time. His new deodorant smelled very good this morning. He suddenly noticed all the different smells that went into it. There were flowers, spices, lots of things he had never smelled before. His nose felt a bit wet, too. Was he getting a cold? Probably not if he could smell things so well. Darren walked over to the mirror and looked at his face. His face looked worse than ever. His nose was wet and shiny. It was moving a lot, like an animal's nose. It looked like a rabbit smelling its breakfast. But this wasn't the most shocking thing. His top lip had long, thick hairs on it. They were like the hairs on an animal's nose. They were like the whiskers of a rabbit. Darren screamed. Time, the present. Place, Singapore. Julie Ong had been 14 for 3 weeks. A lot of her friends were 14 too. They all agreed that a young woman should watch her weight. It was especially important not to eat sweets and cakes. Julie hadn't eaten a cake or a piece of chocolate since her birthday, but there were still no signs that her parents saw Julie as a young woman. To them, she was still a child. Then there was the strange thing with the comet. Everybody was talking about it. Julie's English teacher gave her class homework about it. They had to describe the comet in a poem. It was so unfair. The comet had been quite beautiful, but writing about it was no fun at all. Julie decided to take a break from her Sunday morning homework. Instead of writing, she would comb her long black hair in the mirror. It was more interesting than writing a poem, at least. Her parents wouldn't notice that she was wasting time. She could hear them at the other end of the house, talking about the comet. They weren't talking loudly, but she could still hear them. Her hearing wasn't normally that good. It was very odd. Julie picked up her hairbrush, her favourite pink one, and walked towards her bedroom mirror. But when she looked at herself, she immediately noticed something strange. There were 2 things rising up and out from her hair. They were on both sides of her head. Julie pushed back her hair and saw that the two things were her ears. They were now pointed at the top, like an animal's ears, and they were bigger too, much bigger. Julie fainted. Darren's new whiskers grew even longer over the next week. His nose became much better at smelling things too. He could smell almost anything from a long distance away now. His dad had his own smell. So had his mum. Everybody had their own smell. Having a good nose was useful, and Darren liked it. He liked his whiskers too, and he couldn't really shave them off. It would hurt, he was sure, if he tried. Anyway, he was getting used to them. In Singapore, Julie Ong discovered that her hearing had become extremely good. She could hear almost everything. Darren didn't know it yet, but the beautiful Vanessa had now grown long teeth like a cat's. She had whiskers too, and suddenly she seemed to enjoy eating a lot of fish. Darren, Julie, and Vanessa were not alone. Sudden changes were happening all over the world. Many young people between the ages of 12 and 18 had developed the special strength of some kind of animal. Sometimes it wasn't immediately obvious, like having the fantastic eyesight of a hunting bird. But often the changes were obvious. Some had grown long tails and they could hold on to things with them. Some had webbed skin on their hands and feet so that they could swim fast. Some had the strength of a bull. Others could run as fast as a horse. They all looked human still, but in some way they had changed. Of course, adults everywhere were extremely worried. Why had their children changed? What had produced the changes? What could they do to help their children? Darren discovered that his amazing nose had many advantages too. He found that he could tell what mood people were in just by their smell, even if they were trying to hide it. That was useful. This new sense of smell was useful in other ways too. If he lost something, he could always find it by using his nose. He helped his mum buy the freshest and tastiest food in the supermarket. He now used deodorant which didn't have a strong smell. His new nose didn't like strong smells anymore. "You'd better not get too used to it," said his dad. "Someday soon we'll be able to get you back the way you were." "Maybe, Dad," Darren said. "But what if I don't want to go back to the way I was?" Darren's father didn't say anything. Like many other parents, he didn't understand how his son could like the changes. He wanted the old Darren back, the Darren without the whiskers and the amazing sense of smell. And why had some young people changed while others hadn't? That was the question every adult in the world was asking. Some adults blamed the children themselves for the changes. They said they watched too much TV, or ate the wrong things, or didn't behave in the right way. Most people blamed the comet. "Comet causes horrible teenage changes," was the kind of headline found on the front page of many newspapers. They all had similar stories. Everybody was saying that it must have been the comet. What else could it have been? The comet had, in some strange way, affected the bodies of some teenagers. "I don't think the changes are horrible," said Julie to her friends. "I think my new hearing is very useful. I think my ears are rather beautiful too." Some of Julie's friends agreed with her. "I like my new wings," said one. "I can change colour like a chameleon. Isn't that cool?" said another. Teenagers everywhere were comparing their changes. Some were stronger, Others were faster, others could jump higher. But no matter what changes happened, they were still teenagers. But then something strange happened. Some teenagers began to return to normal. Some eventually lost all sign of their changes and went back to what they had been before. But why? The answer came almost by accident. A teen called Danny was given a job in an advertisement. Danny had wings and he could fly. In the advertisement, Danny had to fly over a children's party and give out chocolate biscuits. Danny hated chocolate biscuits, but he had to eat some during the advertisement. It was after he ate his second biscuit that something started happening. His wings started to get smaller. Soon they disappeared completely. He couldn't fly anymore. Danny was a normal teenager again. Why had it happened? It was the chocolate. It had to be. Scientists tested the effect of chocolate on other teenagers. They discovered that if the teenagers ate a few things with chocolate in them, they went back to normal. The world now knew why some children hadn't been affected by the comet. The mystery was solved. The comet had only changed teenagers who didn't eat chocolate. I don't like chocolate. You know that, Darren told his parents. I've never liked it. But all you have to do is eat a bit and you'll go back to normal, said Dad. You want to be normal again, don't you, Darren? Darren thought about Vanessa. He liked her new cat looks. Vanessa had found Darren's changes attractive too. She had spoken to him quite a lot lately. If you mean, do I want to be like most of my friends, then yes. But some of my friends have changed, and we like the changes. Why should I want to go back? Anyway, I hate chocolate. His parents couldn't make him change his mind. Maybe if his friends agreed to change back, Darren would too. But that wasn't as easy as it seemed. A lot of teenagers felt the same way as Darren. Some adults accepted their new teenagers because the changes were useful in daily life. If you were faster and stronger, for example, you could work better. But most adults expected that their teenagers would want to return to how they had been before. Many of them did. But a lot of teenagers simply didn't care what the adults wanted. They refused to eat the chocolate. In Singapore, Julie Ong finally ate some chocolate. Soon her beautiful big ears were gone. She often remembered them and was sad. In Sheffield, Darren Miller was using his nose to enjoy the sweet smell of the carrots growing in Vanessa's garden. Vanessa watched him happily as she ate a fish on top of the garden wall.